But what about the depiction of the here and now? Let's look at the present. The Ghost of Christmas Present is larger than life, jolly and full of laughter, and yet also stern and at times dark. He represents all that is good in the world, but at the same time he keeps ignorance and want, in the form of two scrawny and ill-fed children, under his robes. He's also very stern with Scrooge and doesn't put up with any of his bullshit, sometimes throwing Scrooge's own words right back at him and not letting up at all when Scrooge starts to feel remorse. Aside from the Alastair Sim version of the ghost having little to no personality, the depictions of this ghost in the movies have been very good. The Muppet version focused mostly on the jolliness of the character, cutting out ignorance and want as well as most of the angrier words. While in contrast, the Patrick Stewart version of the character was mostly just stern and rarely cracked a smile. But the best ones were the ones that had both aspects, and I think George C. Scott's version is probably my favorite. He's kind of like the anti-Scrooge, using Scrooge's tactics of sarcasm and dry, cruel humor and throwing them right back at him.
But if he is to die, then let him die, and decrease the surplus population.
But I also like the Zemeckis animated version, who's often able to keep Scrooge in line without any words at all. Also, this. I love it. As far as depictions of the present go, however, the movies are a bit disappointing. While the past is very much centered around Scrooge, the present is anything but. The ghost takes Scrooge to the very corners of the earth, to places where Scrooge would never in his wildest dreams have imagined himself being. A mine, a lighthouse, a ship on the sea, and of course, his own clerk's home. Through this, we get to see the many ways in which people are celebrating Christmas, even if they don't have the means to, and we get to see the type of celebrations that Scrooge is missing out on by being the way that he is. The movies basically hit the highlights. Bob Cratchit's house, Nephew Fred's house, and maybe a few other scenes, but nothing with the sheer scope of what the book has. The only exception to this is the Patrick Stewart version, which gives us a very beautifully edited montage of scenes linked together with the carol Silent Night. They also put a lot of focus on the many different types of Christmas traditions practiced by Fezziwig, Fred, and the Cratchit family. And while they don't have the scope of the book, the other movie versions do put a focus on how the poor try to celebrate Christmas. Alastair Sim actually shows us Scrooge's old love, Alice, aiding the poor during the Christmas season. And the George C. Scott version shows us the anguish of a homeless family trying to keep the Christmas spirit despite their condition. But ultimately, the book accomplishes this better. Even the Patrick Stewart scenes are taken directly from the book's descriptions. So in the end, it's the broad scope of the book, led by the jolly yet uncompromising ghost of the present, that wins the point. So now we have the most feared ghost of them all, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. This is the most mysterious ghost of the three. He's shrouded in darkness and silence, never speaking but only pointing the way that Scrooge should go. It's a fitting representation of the future, which we cannot see or hear but can only move toward. The future exists in shadow, and as the story also points out to us, it can be changed. Which is why I find Zemeckis' idea of having this ghost just be a shadow so interesting and compelling. You don't really get the sense that the ghost is there, at least not in a corporeal sense, but you can feel its presence looming. I also really like the Alastair Sim version of the ghost because you never really see it. The most you see is a hand or a fold of a cloak. That's it. And yet you know that something is there terrifying Scrooge. The other versions, though not quite as innovative, still get the point across. But at times they are a little too solid. Like you can actually see eyes underneath the hood of the Patrick Stewart version, and this scene from the George C. Scott version just makes me giggle inappropriately. I mean, what is he, on a skateboard? But once again, what really decides it for me is the depiction of the shadows of the future itself, particularly the last scene. And at this point, the only movie that I've seen get that scene even remotely right is the Muppet version. Yes, once again, the version with the puppets is far more subtle than the other movie versions. The idea of this scene is not to frighten Scrooge in the same way that he was frightened by Marley, but to frighten Scrooge with the prospect of what's to come. And yet so many movie versions seem bound and determined to give this a horror movie feel. You got George C. Scott's bombastic music and lightning flashes between each scene. Most of the Patrick Stewart version is okay, until the very end when they have him falling into the grave. And the less said about the Zemeckis film, the better in this round. Alastair's Sim version actually does have some subtlety, but they put the focus on the wrong thing. Scrooge isn't supposed to be shaken merely by the fact that he died. He's supposed to be shaken by the fact that he died unwanted and unloved. That's the point of showing us Tiny Tim's death, to draw a comparison between this anonymous man who died with nobody caring, and Tiny Tim who died in the presence of a loving family. And in the book, and to their credit in most of the movie versions, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come doesn't take Scrooge to see Tiny Tim until Scrooge asks to see tenderness connected with the death. But the Alastair Sim version reorders those scenes and puts the Tiny Tim scene first and then follows it with the Scrooge scenes. And so that comparison between the two deaths is not as strong because we didn't just see it before it's revealed who it was that died. The result being that Scrooge doesn't seem to be frightened by the fact that he died unwanted and unloved, but just by the fact that he died. The book is really the only version of the story I've seen that portrays this scene with the kind of subtlety that it deserves, though, in all fairness, the Muppet movie does do a pretty good job. So with this category, no contest. Book wins. So now it all comes down to story. Who's the better storyteller, Charles Dickens or the movie industry? Well, by and large, the movie industry does know how to do this story justice. While there may be flaws here and there, you still get that timeless story of a man recovering his humanity. Scrooge's character has growth and depth, you feel an emotional attachment to the other characters, and you get those warm fuzzies that really get you into the Christmas spirit. Which is not to say that the book doesn't have the same effect. I think what's great about the book is the sheer simplicity of the story. It's not that long and there's nothing overly complicated about it, and so even people who would normally be daunted reading something by Dickens can enjoy this story. And you can't help but love the cadence of the language. This story really was meant to be read aloud, and a lot of people still do read it aloud at Christmas time. A Christmas Carol has become a cherished part of our holiday tradition, as have the watching of the films. And just like with the character of Scrooge, each film delves a little deeper into the story, whether it's Alastair Sim's version looking more deeply into Scrooge's past, or George C. Scott's subtle take on the character. Each version finds something new to examine, some new angle to look at the story from. And I think there are aspects of each movie that are better than those same aspects in the book. So what it all boils down to is this. Which version should be considered the superior story? The varied and often deeper explorations of the movies? Or the original book that inspired them in the first place? Now, you could make this argument with pretty much any book and movie adaptation, and to be honest, I don't normally use it because if I did, books would win pretty much every time. But in this case, I think I almost have to. These 5 movies and many other visual adaptations of the story that we haven't looked at are incredible. The book is such a timeless, classic story that it has inspired not just 1 or 2 good movie adaptations, but a bunch. And yet it's still the original book that people think of when they think of this story. Hell, even the Muppet movie had Charles Dickens himself narrating the story, even if he does look like a blue, long-nosed freak of nature.
Absolutely!
Plus, these movies are consistently faithful to the original story. The dialogue that we've come to expect and enjoy in each of these adaptations is right out of the Dickensian text.
Keep Christmas in your own way and leave me to keep it in mine.
There's more of gravy than of grave about you. I could walk it blindfolded.
Come in and know me better, man.
I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
I mean, many of us could probably recite half the novel without even trying. It's been so firmly ingrained into our systems. As I've said, the movies are absolutely brilliant. And it's that reason more than anything that makes the classic tale of the book the superior story. So thanks for joining us on this special holiday edition of Books vs. Movies. Have a safe and joyous holiday season, and yes, I am going to end this review in the most predictably cliché way imaginable, but come on, it is Christmas. So, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us.
God bless us. God bless us.
God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
happy holidays, everyone.